All right, everybody. It's Thursday morning at SEMA. We've been here since Monday, actually. And by Thursday, you start to lose your voice a little bit. You start to walk a little funnier. It takes you longer to get from point A to point B. You forget what time it is. But that's all part of SEMA, which is amazing. But there's just so much things to see and do here that you really can't get it all in a week. You need about a month to do all this stuff. So we're going to here to showing you the highlights of the things we can come around to. We're going to find out more about what's going on here at the Dodge booth this morning, which is pretty cool. I'm a big Dodge fan. I'm a Ford guy at heart, but a Dodge fan anyway. And one of the things that we heard about before we even showed up at SEMA was the Dodge Lowliner. Check this thing out. It's a 68 Dodge with not only 22-inch wheels, but a brand new Cummins turbo diesel in it as well. Diesel, as we all know, is the big thing these days, and this motor in particular has been set up pretty nicely inside this Lowliner. If you look around too at this thing, the wheels themselves, those 22 inches, are all custom. The paint is amazing, and as far as the Dodge pickups go, you don't really see a whole lot of these things being customized in any sort of way. Why that is, I'm not really sure. The Dodges never really came on as hard as the Fords and especially the Chevys, which makes this thing even more unique. It makes it cooler, I think. I like the nod that it gives to like classic low riding with the Lowliner logo and the way they did that in the bed and into the tailgate. The lines of this thing are really pretty cool. It reminds me a little bit of the early Ford pickup trucks as well, and some of the early unibodies have a similar kind of vibe to them. But in '68, by the time Dodge was building these trucks, these were workhorses. I mean, these guys were not being really thought of as luxury cars in any sort of way. This thing really, really changes that and puts that whole idea up on end. So look at the paint on this thing as well. Just really cool. That's definitely a nod to the low riding community, as well as a nod to diesel performance that's so hot right now, and the history of Dodge in general. These guys, I think Dodge has always done really kind of outlier cool stuff, especially when it comes to muscle. So this thing's pretty cool. We had a good time looking at this and conjuring up what we would talk about, and seeing it finally in person just makes it that much cooler, I think. So, Challengers. The Challenger whole system here at Dodge. One of the things I've always thought was pretty cool about Challenger in particular is that I've always thought Challenger and the Challenger lines kind of are a nod back to the days in muscle car performance, especially when you could actually customize just about anything from the factory, like from the dealership. You can actually order your six pack or your scat pack. You could order your different interior and different wheels. So Dodge and Challenger have been doing a lot more of that than most other of the big threes. And this one in particular, the modularity of these cars and the way you can actually like pick and choose the kind of performance package you want to personalize it is always pretty cool. And this one in particular, this Scat Pack, is really, really indicative, I think, of what's the best of Dodge and Challenger right now. Okay, have you guys heard of the Hellephant motors that Dodge has been putting out? These crazy giant horsepower crate motors? Well, check this out. The Christine car, 58 Plymouth Fury with a Hellephant motor in it. Check this thing out. Look at this. They got this thing stuffed all the way under the hood of the Christine. And if you're talking about the Christine movie, if you remember that Stephen King movie, and Christine took on a life of her own, I mean, I don't really need to tell you guys about the Christine movie, but if I was going to be doing Christine these days, I think a Hellephant in a 58 Plymouth is pretty bad. And especially if you're thinking about the way that these things were built back when they were, I can only imagine what the underpinnings of this car is. You don't just stuff a Hellephant in a 58 Plymouth. So I don't know what's underneath this thing, but I can only imagine it's just as stout as that Hellephant crate. Okay, and if you guys remember the movie Christine, where like he gets all crumpled up and she gets set on fire, and she comes rolling back into the garage, and he walks around to the front of the car, and she like pops one of her fenders out, and he's all, "Show me." The Hellephant really is the motor that you want inside the car when it does that. If I had this thing, I would actually pull this thing into the garage every night. I pull it out, and I just go, "Show me," and I just watch her rebuild herself. Let's go look at this Challenger. Okay, a Drag Pak Challenger. Take a look at this thing. If you're talking about like the glory days of muscle, I think it's right now. We talk a lot about this at Hemmings. Like, when is the glory days of the muscle car era? If you can actually plunk down a credit card and buy 1,000 horsepower and a car that can actually handle that kind of power, That's the glory days of muscle, and I think that's right now. Take a look at this thing. All right, we're here. We're done with the Dodge booth now. We're going to walk outside and make our way back to our original headquarters. We'll take a look. Okay, you guys, we're back outside again, and here under the Ford Bronco tent, which is really interesting about Ford, it's only basically labeled as the Bronco experience of some sort, which is neat. But the thing that we saw from a distance were some of these early Bronco off-road Mint 400 Baja style racing trucks from the late 60s and early 70s. This is the coolest stuff going on right now at SEMA. And one of the things that I love about these trucks is that these are the real things. These are the actual Broncos that were raced by guys like Larry Minor and Rod Hall, the Big Ole with Bill Stropp, and some of these other early racing, off-road racing guys that really made a name for this stuff. This is great. This is one of the greatest things about SEMA that I love. You can actually get to see the real trucks that were used way back when, and like I said, in the late 60s and early 70s, to run things like the Mint 400, which was like sort of this crazy outlaw racing style that was mainly launched here in Las Vegas. So there's a lot of great history here with some of these trucks that actually ran the Mint 400 from Las Vegas. The Mint 400 is still raced right now. It's quite a different thing with the trophy truck style of machine than these early almost stock Broncos that are just really just torn apart and put back together again by guys like Bill Stropp. But take a look at this. The Big Ole is probably one of the most famous of these off-road racers. One of the most conspicuous things and one of the most iconic things about the Big Ole was the wing on the roof of it. You can notice the Big Ole truck from a distance every time you see that wing. The other thing you always see is the Parnelli Jones and Bill Stropp name. These guys really kind of helped invent, or if not invent, at least define what it meant to be an off-road racer and really get into the four-wheel drive and off-road scene. So let's just walk around some of these guys a little bit more. Another great thing about the Ford off-road scene in the 70s were the second generation Bronco, the bigger style ones that were based on F-Series frame and body. These are like a dent side truck, 73 to 79 Fords, all basically the same body style. The 78 and 79 grill on a Bronco was a pretty iconic thing to be running around in back in those days. So here's yet another early racer. These guys, the old Autofab Bronco, this thing also made a name for itself fairly well. Not nearly as well known as some of the other ones like the Parnelli Jones and those guys, but Don and Ken Moss, Dave Grunman, those guys really did help define what it meant to be an off-road racer at the end of those days. Okay, guys, we're going to wrap it up this morning. It's time to get back inside. We've got spent a lot of time outside, and we've gotten away from the rest of the crew. I feel like they probably think we're playing hooky, so we got to get back in and get to some other work we have to do. Work, it's a lot of fun, but it's still work for us. And one of the great things about SEMA also is what you find tucked away in nooks and crannies of this show. Like, for instance, this 56 Chevy Bel Air that we just came across. We stumbled across it as we're heading back to our show booth. And this thing is really cool and very indicative of what we're seeing more of these days, especially here at SEMA, with the wheel choice. Custom wheels made to look like some sort of wheel cover, but it's a full wheel. These things are really cool, and we're seeing better and better and cooler examples of it. That's really neat. Those orange wheel woods that kind of match the paint is pretty neat as well. Those Radline wheels are neat. But that true knockoff, is it a true knockoff? I'm not really sure. It's probably a 5-bolt underneath a cap, but to make it look like that true tri-bar spinner knockoff is really a neat look. It's got like a lot of different influences on this thing. So it's a classic, tri-5 50s car, but the wheels, the stance, the suspension, the way it sits and the way it's lowered, it has that modern look to it. So it's a really neat blend of old and new interior as well. So again, it's the kind of great things we're seeing at SEMA this week while we're here. We will talk again with you tomorrow morning for our last walk around, and looking forward to it, you guys. One last day. Tomorrow morning is Friday, so we'll see you then. Bye-bye.